I still remember the sound of the key scraping against the lock. Not because I was trying to get inside my own house, because for the first time in 38 years, my own front door refused to let me in. I stood there wearing the same clothes I'd left the hospital in that morning. A small overnight bag rested beside my feet, and a plastic bracelet was still wrapped around my wrist with my name printed on it. My chest ached where the surgeons had operated only 6 days earlier, and my doctor had warned me not to lift anything heavier than 10 pounds. The key turned halfway. Then it stopped. I frowned and tried again. Nothing. At first, I thought the medication had made me clumsy. I took a slow breath and tried a third time. The key didn't fit. That's when I noticed something I should have seen immediately. The lock was brand new. The brass finish gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. My old lock had scratches near the keyhole from years of use. This one looked like it had come straight out of the box. I stared at it for several long seconds before knocking. No answer. I knocked harder. Finally, footsteps approached. The door opened just 3 inches, held back by a security chain I had never installed. My son, Ethan, looked at me through the gap. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't surprised either. "You're back already?" he asked. Already. As though I'd returned from a weekend fishing trip instead of open heart surgery. My key won't work. I changed the locks. He said it so casually that for a moment, I wondered if I had misunderstood him. "You? What?" "I changed the locks. I can hear you, Ethan." My voice shook. "Why?" He sighed like I was wasting his time. "We'll talk about it. I'd rather talk inside." "I don't think that's a good idea." Those words hit harder than the surgery ever could. "I live here." He looked away for a second before meeting my eyes again. "Not anymore." Then he quietly shut the door. I stood on my own porch with my overnight bag in one hand and a hospital discharge folder in the other, wondering how a father could become homeless without ever selling his house. What my son didn't know, what he never bothered to find out, was that the house he'd just locked me out of wasn't legally his to control, not even close. And by the time he discovered the truth, everything he thought he owned would disappear. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 68 years old. For 39 years, I worked as a structural engineer in Columbus, Ohio. I wasn't rich. I wasn't famous. But I believed in showing up every day, paying my bills on time, and keeping my promises. My wife Linda used to say I collected responsibilities the way other people collected baseball cards. She wasn't wrong. I liked fixing things. Leaky faucets, broken fences, neighbors' lawnmowers, family problems. If something needed doing, I usually found myself doing it. Maybe that's where I went wrong with Ethan. I fixed too much. His mother passed away from pancreatic cancer 12 years before all of this happened. Watching Linda disappear one painful day at a time nearly destroyed both of us. Ethan was 27 then. He'd always been close to his mother, closer than he ever was to me. She had a way of softening my rough edges. Whenever I said no, she'd explain why. Whenever I pushed him too hard, she'd remind me he wasn't me. After she died, the balance disappeared. I buried my wife on a rainy Tuesday. By Friday, I was back at work because sitting in that empty house hurt too much. Ethan handled grief differently. He quit his job, stayed home, started drinking more than he admitted. I tried to help him. God knows I tried. I paid his bills for nearly a year, covered his truck payment, paid off 2 credit cards, even let him move back into the house after he promised it would only be temporary. Temporary turned into 3 years, then 4. Eventually, he met a woman named Vanessa. She was attractive, confident, always perfectly dressed, the kind of person who smiled with her mouth instead of her eyes. The first time we met, she hugged me before I'd even introduced myself. I'm so excited to finally meet Ethan's dad. She smelled like expensive perfume. I've heard so much about you. Looking back, I wish I'd asked exactly what she'd heard. Within 6 months, they were married. I offered to help them with a down payment on a home, not because I wanted them gone, because I wanted them to build something that belonged to them. Ethan shook his head. It doesn't make sense to waste money. Vanessa agreed immediately. Why buy another house when this one is so big? This is my house. I reminded them gently. Our house, Ethan corrected. He laughed after saying it, like it was just a joke. I laughed too. I wish I hadn't. Little comments have a strange way of becoming real if nobody challenges them. The changes happened slowly enough that I barely noticed. The living room furniture Linda and I had picked out together disappeared one weekend. Vanessa donated it. Without asking, she replaced everything with modern gray furniture that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby. The family photographs came off the walls. She said the house needed a cleaner aesthetic. Linda's china cabinet ended up in the basement because it was dated. My wife's favorite quilt vanished from the guest room. Apparently, it clashed with the new color scheme. Every time I protested, Ethan would tell me I was overreacting. It's just furniture, Dad. They're just pictures. It's only a cabinet. Maybe. But grief doesn't measure objects by their price. It measures memories. That quilt still smelled faintly like lavender because Linda always tucked dried lavender into the linen closet. The china cabinet held tiny scratches from where Ethan had rolled toy cars across it when he was 6. The photographs weren't decorations. They were proof that we'd once been a family. One evening, I came home from work and found contractors tearing out the kitchen. What happened? Vanessa smiled. Surprise. The kitchen was perfectly fine. It looked old. It was renovated 6 years ago. She shrugged. We're increasing the property's value. We. That word again? I asked how they were paying for such an expensive remodel. Ethan looked uncomfortable. I refinanced. I blinked. You refinanced what? The house. You can't refinance my house. He hesitated. It was easier than you think. That conversation ended with more questions than answers. The next morning, I drove to the county recorder's office during my lunch break. After 20 minutes, a clerk handed me copies of the property records. Everything was exactly as I expected. The deed listed one owner, me. No loans. No refinancing. No ownership changes. When I got home that evening, I asked Ethan to explain. He admitted the truth. Vanessa's uncle worked for a contractor who had offered financing for the kitchen. Ethan had simply assumed the house would eventually become his anyway. It'll all work out. No, I said quietly. It won't. For the first time in years, I set a boundary. No more renovations. No more replacing things. If you want a different house, buy one. Vanessa didn't speak to me for nearly 2 weeks. The silence should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like living inside a thunderstorm that hadn't decided when to strike. Then, my health began failing. It started with fatigue. I blamed my age. Then, dizziness. Then shortness of breath, climbing stairs. My family doctor referred me to a cardiologist. Tests led to more tests. Finally, the specialist sat across from me with folded hands. You need surgery. I remember driving home in silence. Not because I was afraid of dying, because I suddenly realized how alone I'd become inside my own home. When I told Ethan, he barely looked up from his phone. When? Next Tuesday. Okay, that was it. Vanessa asked whether the surgery would affect the family vacation they'd been planning. I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. The morning of my operation, my neighbor, Frank, drove me to the hospital. Frank had lived across the street for nearly 20 years. We'd built decks together, shared football games, helped each other shovel snow every winter. He waited with me until they called my name. Your boy coming? He said he'd meet me later. Frank nodded. He better. Ethan never came. Neither did Vanessa. When I woke up after surgery, the first face I saw belonged to a nurse adjusting my IV. The second belonged to Frank. He was carrying a paper cup of terrible hospital coffee. Thought you could use company. I looked toward the door. No family? He hesitated just long enough to answer the question. I haven't seen them. For 6 days, Frank visited every afternoon. My son visited once. He stayed less than 15 minutes. Most of that time was spent answering text messages. Before leaving, he asked whether I'd signed any paperwork. What paperwork? The hospital paperwork. I signed admission forms. No, I mean, estate paperwork. I frowned. What estate paperwork? In case something happens. Something inside me went cold. I'm still alive. I know. Then why are we discussing my estate? He forced a laugh. I'm just trying to be prepared. Prepared. Such a harmless word. Unless someone is preparing for your death. After he left, I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation. That evening, I called my attorney, Michael Reeves. Michael had handled Linda's estate years earlier and had become a trusted friend. I need to update a few things, I told him. Everything okay? I hope so. He visited me the next morning carrying a leather briefcase. We talked for almost 2 hours. Not just about legal documents. About family. About disappointment. About mistakes fathers make when they mistake love for endless sacrifice. Before leaving, Michael placed a sealed envelope into my hospital bag. If you ever feel something isn't right, call me before you make another move. I promised I would. 6 days later, Frank drove me home. And that's when I discovered the new locks. That's when my son closed the door in my face. Frank stood beside me in stunned silence. Finally, he muttered, "Danny, did that boy really just lock you out of your own house?" I looked down at the hospital bracelet still around my wrist, then back at the front door. "No." Frank frowned. "What do you mean?" I slowly reached into my overnight bag and wrapped my hand around the sealed envelope Michael had given me at the hospital. For the first time since Ethan shut the door, I wasn't thinking about getting back inside. I was thinking about why he seemed so certain he no longer needed me. Because certainty like that doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a lie. And I had a feeling that someone had convinced my son that the house already belonged to him. They were about to discover just how wrong they were.